What happens when a police officer with a power complex crosses paths with a woman who surpasses him in everything that truly matters? It was a Wednesday night, one of those nights when time seems to slow down. Just after 11 p.m., Jackson, Mississippi, was nearly silent. The city lights, flickering and sparse, reflected on the damp streets, casting slow dancing shadows across the asphalt. The distant sound of a train and the occasional echo of lone tires were the only things breaking through the night. A few workers were returning from late shifts. Others were simply passing through the city in silence. And it was in that silence that the black SUV appeared. Government issued. Tinted windows. No flash, just presence. The kind of vehicle that doesn't catch the eye at first glance, but for trained or overly suspicious eyes, signals authority. At the wheel was Lieutenant Colonel Camille Dawson, 44 years old, black, sharp mind, flawless posture, fresh out of a strategic meeting at a military base south of Meridian. A woman who had seen the world up close, faced the chaos of conflict zones, built a career with discipline, and overcome every obstacle thrown at her by systems never designed for her success. Camille was tired, but alert, humming softly to herself. The road, at that hour, felt almost like a ritual. She kept a steady speed, low beams on, hands firm on the wheel. No infractions. No mistakes. But sometimes, simply existing in the wrong place, or just driving the right car with the wrong skin color, is all it takes. At the corner of Jefferson Street, Sergeant Travis Harlan sat in his parked cruiser, sipping cold coffee. A veteran officer in Jackson, white, 42 years old, and carrying a deep, nameless anger for years. That night, he was bored, no calls coming in, scrolling his phone while waiting for something, anything, to give his shift a shot of adrenaline. And then he saw it. That black SUV, moving through his line of sight a little too slowly, or maybe too fast, it didn't matter. What mattered was that it looked important. It looked superior. And, in that moment, Harlan needed to feel like he was in control of something. He tossed the foam cup aside and hit the gas. Flipped on the lights before the driver could even notice. When the red and blue flashes lit up the rearview mirror, Camille didn't flinch. She took a deep breath, like someone who knew the routine all too well, calmly signaled and pulled over to the right. Nothing in her movements hinted at defiance. But for certain men, the simple act of a black woman staying calm is already seen as defiance. The patrol car door swung open forcefully. Harlan stepped out with long strides, a flashlight in one hand, the other hovering dangerously close to his holster. His face was tight, chest puffed out. He reached the SUV window without so much as a greeting. License and registration. The voice was dry, direct, almost threatening. Camille lowered the window halfway. She kept her hands visible, just as she'd learned to do since she was young. "Good evening, officer. May I ask the reason for the stop?" Harlan pointed the flashlight directly at her face, aggressively. "You were changing lanes without signaling. Seemed erratic." She raised an eyebrow, skepticism controlled. "I wasn't." "License and registration," he repeated louder. She didn't argue. Moved slowly, unhurried. Took the documents from the glove compartment and handed them over. "This is an official vehicle. I'm a federal employee." He looked at the papers with disdain. "Military?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. "That doesn't put you above the law." "I never said it did." The tension in the air was thick, sharp. But Camille kept her gaze steady, her expression composed. Then he said, "Step out of the vehicle." She hesitated, surprised. "I'm sorry?" "Step out of the car. You're going to perform a sobriety test." She held her posture, but her eyes hardened. "On what grounds?" "I haven't been drinking. I'm cooperating. I'd just like to understand the reason." Harlan stepped closer. "Are you refusing to comply with a direct order from a law enforcement officer?" "I'm asking for clarification." The reply came steady, without arrogance. That was enough. He reached out and yanked her car door open with force, as if trying to strip away any sense of control she had. It was at that moment that Camille calmly reached for her phone and activated the camera. Just letting you know this interaction is being documented. Harlan hesitated for a split second. He saw the phone, but didn't back down. Out of the car. Now. She complied. Stepped out with grace, unhurried. Even without a uniform, she carried the posture of a commander, shoulders straight, eyes on the horizon. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence said it all. He made her walk a straight line under the dim light of a street lamp. Standard sobriety test. She executed each step with near military precision. No mistakes. No hesitation. Still, Harlan issued her a citation for failure to maintain lane. Camille took the paper. Read it, folded it calmly, and tucked it away. She didn't say a single word. Just gave him a firm look, not of anger, but the gaze of someone who had seen the world and knew exactly what that man was trying to do. She got back in the car and drove away. Sergeant Harlan had no idea who that woman was. He didn't know she was an advisor on national security committees, that her name was known in rooms where real decisions were made. He didn't know she had connections with journalists, legal experts, commanding officers, and senators. He didn't know he had just planted a ticking time bomb in his own career. Because when a man with a power complex tries to belittle a woman who surpasses him in everything that truly matters, her silence is not submission. It's strategy. And the response? It was still coming. The next morning, the sun had barely kissed the old rooftops of Jackson, Mississippi, when the truth began to move. Camille Dawson woke early, as she always did. Strong coffee, no sugar. Table set, discipline intact. But there was a tension in the air, as if the universe were holding its breath before speaking. She hadn't yet decided whether to share the video. For her, this wasn't the first time she had been underestimated. No, the first time the invisible uniform of a black woman, stitched together from achievements, degrees, and years of service, had been ignored by a gaze full of cheap authority. But the video, that video was something else. A longtime friend, an Air Force captain and fellow military academy graduate, saw the file in her phone gallery during a casual coffee that morning. He watched in silence. His eyes hardened. "Do you have any idea what this represents?" he asked, looking at her like someone seeing a spark capable of becoming a wildfire. Camille nodded slowly. "I do. But the question is, do I want to start that fire?" He didn't press. He simply asked for permission to send it to someone, a reporter. Trusted. Black. Brave. The kind of woman who doesn't lower her eyes for anyone. Camille took a deep breath and said, "All right, but let me know if this gets out of hand." In less than 24 hours, the video was in the hands of Janice Monroe, veteran NBC correspondent and two-time Emmy Award winner for her reporting on police brutality and institutional racism. When Janice watched the footage alone in her New York office, she paused halfway through. Camille's phone camera was steady, her voice calm, the officer authoritarian, forcing a narrative that didn't exist. Janice rewound the video, watched it again. At the end, she said only one sentence, a whisper sharp as a blade. "This woman is not just anyone." As the video quietly made its way through journalists, activists, and civil rights leaders, Camille remained silent. She didn't want the spotlight. She never had. But she knew she held something valuable, raw proof that respect still had to be demanded, even when it should have been automatic. This wasn't about a ticket or a frustrated sergeant on a slow night shift. It was about an entire system that treated black women as threats, even when they were calm, even when they were right. She thought of her grandmother, a nurse in segregated hospitals during the 1960s, who used to say, "The dignity of a black woman disturbs more than rebellion, because she doesn't beg, she commands." That same afternoon, the video leaked. No one knows exactly who did it. Maybe someone from the newsroom. Maybe someone from the Justice Committee. Maybe fate itself, tired of waiting. First, it appeared on Twitter. Then, in Facebook groups. Within hours, it spread to TikTok, Instagram, and the major debate forums. The video's title was simple: "When a badge meets a woman stronger than it." The reactions were immediate. This woman held more composure than most generals. She could have ended that cop's career with one call. But she chose peace. That's real power. If that were my mother, my sister, my daughter, I'd be at that police station right now. The video passed 1 million views in under 10 hours. And then, the calls started coming in. CNN's team called. The New York Times requested an interview. Veteran groups began posting in support. Officers from other cities sent private messages saying, "Thank you for exposing this. It happens more than people realize." But Camille? She remained silent. It wasn't pride. It was strategy. She wanted the truth to speak for itself. And it was speaking loudly. Meanwhile, at the Jackson Police Precinct, Sergeant Travis Harlan showed up for his night shift as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. The looks. The atmosphere. The shift supervisor called him in for an informal conversation. He was told there was an investigation underway. A review of his conduct. Nothing major, for now. But Harlan wasn't stupid. He knew. The video was out. And the country was watching. He had lost control of the narrative. That night, Camille walked alone through her backyard under the dark, warm Mississippi sky. The breeze carried the scent of damp earth. She looked up and thought, how many of us have gone through this and couldn't prove it? How many stayed silent just to survive? But she wasn't a victim. She never had been. She was the daughter of a generation that learned not to beg for respect, but to demand it with posture. And now, the truth had found the light. And once the light catches fire, there's no putting it out. While the country boiled, Sergeant Travis Harlan still slept soundly. In his mind, everything had followed protocol. Stop, suspicion, test, ticket. End of story. The night's report? Brief. No critical notes. Standard conduct. He wrote it himself. He didn't even bother to mention that the driver was a U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, a combat veteran, and held federal-level security clearance. That didn't matter. In his mind, she was just a mouthy woman. And worse, black. Behind the scenes at the precinct, the conversation was different. 3 days after the stop, Harlan was called into the office of the Jackson Chief of Police. The air was tense. Cold air conditioning. Blinds closed. A silence that screamed, "Sergeant, we're going to need you to step away from your duties temporarily." "With pay?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "For now." The official reason? Investigation into misconduct during a nighttime traffic stop. But Harlan knew. He had already heard the whispers. He saw colleagues murmuring, avoiding eye contact in the hallway. He knew the video had leaked, and it was out of control. The country wasn't the same anymore since that footage hit the screens. In Washington, D.C., inside a newsroom lined with dark wood and walls covered in photos of wars, protests, and courtroom victories, an editor at the Washington Post magazine was finalizing the cover story. Working title: When Power Meets Prejudice, the Camille Dawson Case. The journalist who wrote the piece had interviewed Camille's former commanders, soldiers she had led, and professors from the West Point Military Academy. They all said the same thing. She's one of the most competent officers of her generation. A natural leader. Respected. Composed. Tireless. The article walked the line between the personal and the systemic. How a black woman, even at the top of the military hierarchy, could still be treated as a suspect just for existing in a public space, at night, in a black car. By Monday morning, the magazine hit the stands. And the country stopped to listen. The impact was immediate. In Atlanta cafes, black female attorneys pointed to Camille's name as an example for their daughters. In Detroit beauty salons, the cover was laminated and hung on the wall. In Texas, veterans held a vigil in front of a military base with signs that read, "She protected the country." Who protected her? CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News panels lit up with debate. Opinions were divided, but one truth remained. This wasn't just about one cop. It was about the weight of racism disguised as authority. It was about the difference between a uniform worn to serve and one worn to dominate. Camille watched it all from a distance. No interviews. No speeches. She walked early in the park, read letters that came in the mail. Some full of support, others laced with veiled threats. But she wasn't afraid. She was focused. She knew the fight wasn't just hers. It belonged to the black doctor constantly questioned at her own hospital, to the black judge who hears, "You look too young for that position," to the black mother stopped on the same street corner every week for a routine check. She represented all of them. And Harlan? He was dragged down by the weight of his own arrogance. By the end of the week, under pressure from the community, his superiors, and a petition with nearly 3 million signatures, he was forced to turn in his badge. There was no press conference, no apology, just a bureaucratic silence. But the damage was done, and he knew that his name was no longer seen as that of a protector, but as an example of what must change. Yet the most powerful moment was still to come, because Camille finally decided to speak. And when a woman like her, trained in strategy, forged in respect, and silent by choice, chooses to speak, the world listens. 2 weeks after the incident that set fire to social media, newsrooms, and political backchannels, Camille Dawson was invited to do something many avoid: speak before the entire nation. The invitation came from the National Committee on Justice and Public Safety, in a special hearing convened to address police stop-and-search practices, racial bias, and abuse of authority. It was televised, broadcast live to millions of American homes. A political stage, but also a moral battleground. That morning, the steps of the federal building in Washington, D.C. were lined with cameras, microphones, and raised cell phones. Camille walked up alone. No security, no entourage, no rush. She wore a custom navy blue suit, clean-cut, with no jewelry, no flashy makeup, only the natural radiance of someone who carries years of earned respect on her shoulders. Her hair, pulled back with simple elegance, revealed a steady face. Not arrogant, just undeniable. As senators, representatives, and experts took their seats, she remained standing, silent, observing. It was the same posture from that night in Jackson, when she stepped out of the car with dignity and recorded her own protection with a phone. The same woman, the same conduct. Only now, the entire nation was watching. When the chairwoman of the committee called her forward, Camille approached the microphone with calm grace. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her voice didn't waver. She began with a pause. And then, in a steady, quiet voice, with no rush to prove anything, she said, "I served my country in regions where the presence of a black woman in command wasn't just rare, it was unimaginable. Even so, I led with respect, with honor. And I never needed a rifle to prove my authority. My conduct was enough." The room fell silent. She took a deep breath, then lifted her eyes to meet, one by one, the men and women seated before her. Some were uncomfortable, others moved. That night, I wasn't in uniform, but everything I had built, my career, my honor, my dignity, was with me. And still, I was treated like a threat. Why? Because the presence of a woman like me unsettles men who only understand power through force. This isn't about me. It's about a system that turns insecurity into authority. A system where character means less than a badge. And as long as that remains true, women like me will keep having to justify our existence. A heavy silence took over the room. Not the silence of apathy, but the silence of impact. The weight of truth. The video of her speech went viral within hours. Clipped excerpts circulated on TikTok, Instagram, and the evening news. But the full video, all 7 exact minutes of Camille before the committee, became a landmark moment. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. And perhaps that's what made it so devastating. Camille began receiving invitations from across the country. Historically black colleges asked her to speak. Prestigious newspapers requested op-eds. Military organizations began reviewing their own conduct protocols based on her case. In New York, a newly commissioned lieutenant approached her after a roundtable discussion, eyes glassy with emotion, and said, "Before I saw you, I thought I had to stay quiet to keep my position. Thank you for showing me another way." Camille listened, smiled, lightly touched the young woman's shoulder, and said, "Always speak, but choose your battles, and never lower your chin." She didn't become a symbol by choice, but by consequence. Camille wasn't seeking fame. She didn't chase headlines. But that day, she understood what true leaders learn on the battlefield. Someone has to take up space. If not for herself, then for those who come after. And she was ready. Sergeant Travis Harlan was not arrested. For many, that would have been the bare minimum. But the truth is, the system rarely moves quickly against its own. What he lost, however, was something far harder to recover. The cloak of impunity he had always operated under. The badge was still his, until the moment it stopped being a shield and became a mirror. And in the reflection, there was no honor. Only a man who mistook authority for ego. No position, no respect, no trust from the community. His colleagues began to avoid his name. The city began to remember his face. He became an example of what not to do. And the harshest truth of all, he would forever be part of a story where he'd never be the protagonist. Camille Dawson, on the other hand, didn't just move on. She didn't return to her routine as if it had all been just another obstacle. Because it wasn't. It was a turning point. And when waters like that part, it's not to retreat, it's to cross. Shortly after her speech at the National Committee, Camille was promoted to Brigadier General. A recognition of her service, her integrity, and most of all, her moral leadership, demonstrated not on foreign soil, but here at home, where the battlefield is called institutional racism. She was invited to join a special advisory group connected to the Department of Justice, focused on police conduct reform, racial justice, and community public safety. But Camille went further. She took on the mission of training new leadership. Black women, young cadets, rookie officers, public servants, people who, like her, carry titles earned through sweat, but also scars no one sees. She launched a national initiative called Conduct is Command, which was soon replicated in military academies and federal training schools. There, she taught what she embodied. It's not the volume of your voice that defines your authority. It's the weight of your character. Camille became a reference, a mentor, an ally, but never a martyr. She didn't let the incident consume her. She transformed it into momentum, into purpose, into platform. Because sometimes, what begins as a routine traffic stop ends as a call to transformation. Not because she sought it out, but because she was ready. And when a man with a power complex crosses paths with a woman who surpasses him in everything that truly matters, in dignity, in composure, in leadership, in vision, he doesn't break her. He becomes part of her story, never the other way around. Did you enjoy these stories of resilience, strength, and legacy? Then don't stop here. If this video touched your heart, leave a like to show that this content matters. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories, ones that will inspire you even more. Share it with everyone, your family, friends, and that family group chat. Spread these voices that need to be heard, because every Black story is a seed of power, and together we help it grow. See you in the next video. And remember, your strength is also a story the world needs to know.